What if the warmest embrace you ever felt was never meant to comfort you, but to wrap you tighter in silence? What if the person who once adored you with impossible passion, who seemed to know your soul from the start, was only ever rehearsing a script, a performance designed not to love you, but to own you, not to understand you, but to dismantle the parts of you that could resist? Most people think they would recognize manipulation tactics when they see them. They believe abuse wears a mask of cruelty, of shouting, of bruises. But what if the most dangerous manipulation begins with a kiss on the forehead, a flood of compliments, and daily declarations of "you are my everything"? What if love bombing is not a mistake of passion, but a precise psychological seduction, a strategic invasion of your trust? You might not even realize it happened. In fact, that is the most terrifying part, because love bombing is not simply flattery. It is not just excitement. It is the accelerated hijacking of your nervous system, the calculated flooding of affection, attention, and promises. Its purpose is not to build connection. It is to disable your guard. This is not romance. This is warfare of the heart. In recent years, psychologists have begun to untangle what survivors have known in their bones. The early euphoria in toxic relationships is not accidental. It is designed. Studies on emotional manipulation, particularly within narcissistic abuse frameworks, reveal that love bombing is one of the most effective manipulation tactics used by those with controlling or exploitative personality structures. Researchers like Dr. Ramani Durvasula and Dr. Craig Malkin have highlighted love bombing as an early phase in abusive cycles, where intensity is used in place of intimacy and speed replaces sincerity. You are not being loved. You are being studied. You are not being cherished. You are being disarmed. The manipulator showers you with affection because it leaves no space for your questions. There is no room to think when you are overwhelmed with grand gestures, fast confessions, or sudden commitments. You mistake speed for depth, but what you are really experiencing is conditioning. Have you ever felt it? That strange emotional high in a new relationship where everything moves too fast, where someone suddenly knows all the right things to say, where you feel seen in ways you never did before, where your fears and pain are met, not with listening, but with promises to rescue you. It feels magical, even healing, until it does not. Then it begins to suffocate. Then you begin to vanish. You were never falling in love. You were being pulled into submission. And what if I told you that this is not rare, that love bombing is not a quirk of toxic people, but a widely used psychological seduction, disguised as chemistry? If someone you know has ever changed overnight from idolizing you to ignoring you, from romantic obsession to distant control, this might already be your story. The love bombing was the setup, the pain that followed, by design. But why do people fall at it? Why do we let ourselves believe this must be real, that such affection could not possibly be a trap? The answer is not as simple as being naive. The truth is darker and more universal. You do not fall for love bombing because you are weak. You fall for it because you are human. You crave meaning, recognition, and emotional safety. And manipulators have mastered how to mirror that desire until it becomes your prison. Stay with me, because in a moment we will unravel a deeper lie, a false belief that almost every person has carried into love, a belief that makes us vulnerable, programmable, even complicit in our own emotional captivity. What if everything you thought about real love was wrong? Since childhood, you have been told that love is supposed to feel like magic, that when it is real, you will know, that intensity means passion, that obsession means devotion. You were taught to expect fireworks, butterflies, and sleepless nights. If someone treats you like royalty, gives you attention you never asked for, and says things you have only dreamed of hearing, then it must be love, right? This is the lie. This belief is not just innocent, it is dangerous, because it opens the door to something darker. It blinds you to the real purpose behind those early emotional highs. You mistake speed for sincerity. You interpret control as care, and before you can question it, you are already hooked. The psychological term is love bombing. The deeper reality is that it is one of the most effective manipulation tactics used by those who do not want connection. They want control. They give you everything, only to take it back once your defenses are down. What felt like romance becomes a contract. What felt like safety becomes a trap. You might think manipulation always looks obvious, but what if manipulation does not begin with cruelty? What if it begins with charm, with attention so overwhelming, so calculated, that it feels impossible to doubt it? Researchers studying narcissistic abuse have observed that love bombing is not a phase. It is a tactic. It is used to manufacture dependency, to simulate intimacy, and to train the brain into associating emotional highs with a single person. According to Dr. Joseph Carver, emotional manipulators often follow patterns that begin with excessive praise and reward, followed by gradual withdrawal and punishment. This creates a trauma bond, where the victim becomes addicted to the cycle of affection and pain. What makes this tactic work is not just the manipulator, it is the internal story you already believe. That being loved means being chosen, that attention must equal value, that someone who says all the right things must mean them. You are not naive for wanting to be loved, but the more deeply you crave something, the more vulnerable you become to illusions of it. Love bombing is not love. It is the illusion of love, used to bypass your critical thinking and pull you into emotional submission. Most people do not know they are being manipulated, not because they are weak, but because the manipulation feels exactly like what they have been told love should feel like. And that is the most devastating part. Think about it. The very story you were taught to trust is the same story a manipulator uses against you. They do not need to force you to fall for them. They only need to say what you have always wanted to hear. Once you accept their script as reality, they do not need to coerce you. You will play your part willingly. You will call it love. You will defend it. You will stay even when it hurts, because you are still hoping to get back the version of them that never existed. This is not just about romance. It is about control. It is about identity. It is about how easily someone can write themselves into your mind if they understand what you want more than you do. You might be wondering, why do we keep falling into this? Why is love bombing so common now in this age of loneliness and hyperconnection? What makes people more likely to fall into this pattern again and again, even after being hurt? To answer that, we need to go deeper into the psychology of reward cycles, the hunger for validation, and how manipulators exploit the brain's need for safety and predictability. We need to explore how your own past, your unhealed wounds, and your buried fears might be helping someone else hold the pen to your story. Before we go there, if this is already making you reflect, pause for a second, breathe, then ask yourself, have you ever felt addicted to someone who once treated you perfectly, but suddenly changed? If so, you are not alone, and you are not broken. Comment below if this already hits close to home. Share what resonated. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs to wake up. Like this video if you have ever questioned whether love was what it claimed to be. Subscribe if you want to see the full picture of how emotional manipulation works, not just in others, but in the stories we believe about ourselves. Because the next layer will not be comfortable, but it will be real. We are going to find out what love bombing really is, underneath the mask. Love bombing is not affection. It is not generosity. It is not romance. It is the deliberate flooding of attention, praise, and validation meant to overpower your instincts. You might think someone is just excited to know you. What you are often witnessing is the early phase of a psychological trap. In clinical terms, love bombing is a manipulation tactic used to create rapid emotional attachment through overwhelming displays of affection. It bypasses your natural defenses, making you feel chosen, special, and deeply seen before you have the chance to ask whether any of it is real. This is not accidental. It is not confusion. It is control. Manipulators who use love bombing are often skilled at mirroring, They reflect back to you the version of yourself you want most to be. They listen not to understand, but to collect data. Your pain becomes their blueprint, your hopes become their dialogue, and before long, they start to feel like the person you have waited for your entire life. But here is the secret: they are not real. What they show you is a mask, a projection, a performance designed to manufacture emotional dependency. Researchers who study emotional manipulation have found strong links between love bombing and personality disorders, like narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, according to Dr. Shannon Thomas, licensed therapist and author of Healing from Hidden Abuse. Love bombing is usually the first phase in an abuse cycle. It is followed by devaluation, gaslighting, control, and eventually discard. This pattern is not unique to romance. It appears in cult indoctrination, political extremism, even corporate grooming. The principle is always the same: flood the subject with praise, validation, and a sense of belonging until they stop thinking critically, then slowly replace that validation with uncertainty, punishment, or withdrawal. By the time the warmth disappears, you are already trapped. You are addicted to the version of them that never existed, and worse, you blame yourself for not being able to bring it back. That is what makes love bombing so effective. It does not only manipulate your present, it rewrites your past. It creates a false narrative of intimacy, so powerful that even when the manipulator begins to hurt you, your mind still clings to the version that first appeared, the one who called you their soulmate, the one who said no one has ever understood them the way you do, the one who swore they would never leave. You begin to believe that the withdrawal of affection is your fault, that if you try harder, love them more, become what they want, the original version will return. This is how trauma bonding begins. It is not a bond based on love, it is a bond based on emotional whiplash. Your brain becomes conditioned to chase the high of validation after each low of rejection. You are not being loved, you are being trained. And the worst part, it feels real. You feel closer to them than anyone else. You justify their behavior. You explain away the red flags. You confuse pain with depth and chaos with chemistry, because the illusion was crafted so perfectly that anything less than obsession now feels empty. This is how manipulation tactics evolve, not through anger, but through seduction, not through threats, but through desire. Love bombing does not break down your boundaries, it melts them. You might tell yourself, but they seemed so genuine. That is the point. They had to. If they had shown you who they were at the beginning, you would have walked away. Instead, they showed you who you wished they were and let you fill in the rest. By the time you realize the truth, you are not just grieving a person, you are grieving a story built from your own longing, written by someone who never meant to stay. Love bombing is not a mistake, it is a weapon. Ask yourself this: have you ever trusted someone who made you feel safe too fast? Have you ever felt like you were finally enough, only to be told you are too much? If so, you might not have been loved, you might have been hunted. And if that thought makes your chest tighten, do not look away, stay here, because this only works if you keep blaming yourself. What happens when you stop? There is a reason love bombing does not feel like manipulation. It feels like a dream. It feels like the story you have been waiting to live since your first heartbreak. That is not coincidence. It is design. When someone love bombs you, they do not just show you affection. They create a narrative, a whirlwind of meaning, timing, symbols, and emotion. They do not meet you. They become what you are missing. They do not ask for love. They perform it. So you feel like you are in the middle of a movie, and who stops a movie halfway through to ask if the script is honest? This is the core danger behind love bombing. It mimics intimacy. It copies the language, the pace, and the emotion of genuine connection. But behind the curtain, it is not about building love. It is about hijacking your reality. Your brain cannot always tell the difference. The feelings are real. The chemicals are real. Dopamine floods your system every time they text first. every time they compliment you, every time they create shared fantasies of the future. You are not imagining the high. That part is real, but the source is not. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist, has studied romantic attraction extensively. She found that during early-stage romantic encounters, the brain lights up in areas associated with reward and addiction. The stronger the emotional surge, the more likely you are to attach quickly and intensely. Love bombing exploits this response, not by chance, but by precision. You are not falling in love. You are being neurologically activated. That is why people in love bombing situations describe the relationship as intense, fated, or all-consuming. They report losing track of time, losing touch with friends, changing routines, sacrificing needs. They often say, "It just felt so right." What they mean is, "It felt like everything I thought love should be." That feeling is the trap. Once the manipulator senses that you are hooked, the dynamic begins to shift. The compliments fade, the texts slow down, the promises become vague. You try harder, you reach out more, you question what changed. You blame yourself, you crave the intensity, but it is gone. This is the moment when love bombing turns into psychological control. You do not want the person as they are now, you want them as they were in the beginning. But that version never existed. It was an illusion, a mask worn to make you vulnerable. As your confusion grows, so does your dependency. This is not love, it is conditioning. You have been trained to associate pleasure with their attention and anxiety with their absence. That pattern mimics addiction. It keeps you chasing a reward that is no longer offered, or worse, only offered when you comply. This is where the idealization flips into devaluation. You are no longer treated as the prize. You are now tested, manipulated, and questioned. You are expected to earn back what was once given freely, and you begin to believe you deserve less because you were given too much. Psychologically, this is the collapse of false intimacy. It is the moment when the romance trap reveals its structure. Love bombing never gave you real love. It gave you a fantasy so powerful, it drowned your instincts. And even when the relationship becomes toxic, abusive, or distant, you might still stay because you remember how it felt at the start. You remember the version of them that said everything perfectly. You remember who you thought they were. You are not in love with them. You are in love with the role they played. Ask yourself this: when you think about the person who hurt you most, do you still find yourself longing for who they were at the beginning? Do you miss them, or do you miss the illusion? If it is the illusion you miss, then what you are holding on to is not love. It is hope wrapped in a lie, and the longer you chase it, the more you lose yourself. But what kind of person does this on purpose? What kind of mind needs to create false love in order to gain power? To understand that, you must step into the mind of the manipulator. To understand love bombing, you must understand the mind of the person behind it, the one who studies you closely, mimics your desires, mirrors your wounds, and gives you exactly what you have been starving for, not because they love you, but because they need something from you, and they are willing to build a fantasy to get it. This is not affection, it is strategy. People who use love bombing as a manipulation tactic are not always aware in the way a con artist might be, but they operate from a deeply ingrained pattern, a belief that people exist to serve them, reflect them, or validate them. They treat relationships like performances, where they must gain control in order to feel secure. Control is the key word. Not connection, not commitment, control. In many cases, love bombers display traits of narcissistic personality disorder, or overlapping patterns from antisocial personality disorder. These are not simply difficult people. These are individuals who lack empathy, fear vulnerability, and rely on dominance to maintain a sense of self. They are addicted to control, not intimacy. Dr. George Simon, a psychologist who specializes in covert emotional manipulation, explains that the most dangerous manipulators are not the openly aggressive ones. They are the charming ones, the charismatic ones, the people who say all the right things, not because they believe them, but because they know you do. The manipulator does not want love. They want control disguised as love. They do not want your heart. They want your surrender. In their mind, the faster you fall for them, the more powerful they become. Love bombing is not just about making you feel good. It is about removing your ability to question what is happening. They create the illusion of intimacy so that you mistake their control for care. This is psychological seduction, rooted in dominance. The manipulator floods you with attention to test how quickly you bond. They use emotional intensity to bypass logic. And when you become dependent on the praise, they begin to shape your behavior. Every act of kindness becomes conditional. Every compliment becomes a currency. Every moment of closeness becomes a contract. This is where the power dynamic shifts. You start adapting yourself to keep their attention. You change your tone. You avoid hard conversations. You suppress your doubts. Not because they asked you to, but because the idea of losing them terrifies you. That terror is not love. It is captivity. The manipulator studies your needs to control you. They study your fears to trap you. They study your values to mimic them back to you. You are not being loved. You are being absorbed. What makes it harder is that many manipulators truly believe they are loving you, but their version of love is ownership. Their idea of intimacy is domination. When you try to assert your needs, they see it as betrayal. When you create boundaries, they call you cold. When you pull away, they intensify the charm until you collapse again. This is not confusion. It is a system built on false promises, driven by fear of exposure. And here is the most difficult truth. What they want from you is not just attention. They want control over your perception. They want you to doubt yourself. They want you to internalize their version of reality. Because once they control how you see them, they control how you see yourself. This is not love. This is psychological colonization. Ask yourself, has someone ever made you feel like the best version of yourself, only to slowly erase that version and claim it as their creation? Have you ever felt like you had to perform love in order to keep it? If so, you have already touched the mind of the manipulator. You have already stood inside the romance trap. And once you see what they truly want, the next question becomes harder. Why do you stay in this toxic relationship? Most people on the outside ask the wrong question. They look at the person caught in emotional manipulation and ask, why do you not leave? As if clarity always leads to escape. As if recognizing the trap is the same as breaking free from it. But leaving is not about knowledge. It is about wiring. It is about chemistry. It is about unlearning what your nervous system has been trained to crave. When you are love-bombed, you do not simply fall for someone. You bond, you attach, you internalize the fantasy as safety. And when it collapses, your body still believes the safety can be brought back. The high becomes the hope. The absence becomes the threat. This is not just emotion. It is neurobiology. Researchers studying trauma bonding have explained how intermittent reinforcement creates addictive emotional patterns. When someone gives you praise, affection, or validation unpredictably, your brain becomes addicted to the chase. It releases dopamine, not only when you receive love, but also when you anticipate it. The unpredictability makes you work harder, not walk away. You do not see withdrawal as a red flag. You see it as a puzzle. You believe if you solve it, the original version of them will return. But that version was never real. You are chasing a ghost that lives in the first few weeks, not the present reality. Love bombing plants a memory so intense, it overwrites your instincts. Even when you see the red flags, you explain them away. You say they are going through something. You say you are being too sensitive. You say it is complicated. But what you are really saying is that you do not want to lose the person who made you feel so alive. That feeling was manufactured. It was not love. It was a drug. And like any drug, it rewires the brain. You begin to associate safety with danger. You begin to feel comfort in chaos. Your boundaries soften. Your sense of self begins to blur. You do not know who you are without their attention. That is not love. That is dependency. Many survivors of love bombing describe this stage as living in a fog. They say they know something is wrong, but they cannot name it. They feel anxious all the time, but they cannot name it. They feel anxious all the time, but they cannot justify it. They feel like they are losing control, but they still defend the relationship. That confusion is not weakness. It is the result of psychological abuse. Dr. Patrick Carnes, who pioneered the study of trauma bonding, described this state as the loss of reality through coercive control. The person being manipulated stops trusting their own judgment. They begin to question their memory, their feelings, and their instincts, not because they are irrational, but because they have been trained to depend on the manipulator for emotional clarity. This is what manipulation tactics are designed to do, not just to win you over, but to keep you in place. Love bombing is not the end of the manipulation, it is the beginning. So why do you not walk away? Because the part of you that is still waiting for the first version of them believes that leaving means failure, that giving up means you were never really loved, that if you just held on a little longer, they would come back. But they will not, because that person never existed. You were not in a relationship, you were in a performance, and now, the stage lights are off, and the script is falling apart. Still, your mind holds on. You believe you can fix it. You believe they need you. You believe you are the exception. Ask yourself, have you ever stayed because you were afraid to start over? Is it because you were afraid that no one else could ever make you feel that way again? If so, you are not weak. You are responding to a system that was designed to keep you exactly where you are. And the deeper question is not why you stay. It is what part of you believes you deserve to. At first, the affection felt healing. You told yourself it was rare. You believed it was safe. Every message, every compliment, every late-night confession seemed to prove that you had finally been chosen. You were seen. You were special. But what happens when that affection becomes the very thing used to control you? This is the second stage of love bombing. Once the manipulator senses your attachment is strong enough, the warmth begins to shift, not disappear completely, not all at once, just enough to confuse you, just enough to make you question what you did wrong. This is not a sudden coldness. It is a slow retreat, a quiet pullback, a missed reply, a colder tone, a postponed plan. It is just enough to make you feel uncertain, but not enough to accuse them of anything. It creates doubt, not distance, and that doubt becomes the weapon. In this stage, the manipulator begins to test how far you will bend, how much you will chase, how quickly you will blame yourself. The affection you once received without asking now becomes conditional. You are rewarded when you comply. You are punished when you question. This is psychological abuse disguised as emotional calibration. You start altering yourself to fit their shifting expectations. You speak softer. You stop raising concerns. You apologize even when you do not understand why. Not because they asked you to, but because the withdrawal of affection is unbearable. It is not just silence. It is strategic silence. The absence of warmth becomes a punishment, the return of it, a reward. And in this way, love becomes a behavioral tool. Psychologists call this idealization and devaluation. In the beginning, you are placed on a pedestal. You are praised, celebrated, romanticized. But as the dynamic progresses, the manipulator begins to devalue you. They pick at your flaws. They compare you to others. They create subtle impressions that you are not enough, or that you are the problem. But the shift is never stable. That is what keeps you hooked. They alternate between affection and cruelty, closeness and distance, praise and criticism. It creates a cycle of confusion where you never know who they will be next, and you begin to internalize that unpredictability as something you caused. This is the trap. You are not chasing them. You are chasing their approval. You are trying to become the version of yourself they seem to love. But that version was never real. It was never you. It was a projection they created in the love bombing phase. As the emotional distance grows, the manipulator begins to rewrite reality. They tell you that you are too sensitive, that you remember things wrong, that they never said what you think they said. This is gaslighting. It is not just denial, it is a strategy to make you question your own mind. By this point, affection is not comfort, it is control. They know exactly when to give it back. When you are slipping away, when you are questioning too much, when you are on the edge of leaving, that is when the warmth returns. Just enough to pull you back, just enough to make you hope again. You are not being loved, you are being managed. The cycle becomes your reality, the highs and lows, your normal, the love bombing, your memory, the silence, your punishment, and the unpredictable attention, your addiction. Ask yourself, have you ever begged for kindness from someone who once gave it freely? Have you ever felt grateful when they stopped hurting you, instead of questioning why they were hurting you in the first place? If so, then affection is no longer love. It has become a weapon, and now that you see it, you cannot ignore the next question. What happens when you stop responding to the reward? If love bombing is a strategy, then behind that strategy is a philosophy, a system of belief, often unspoken, that defines what love means to the manipulator, and more importantly, what you mean to them. It is not affection, it is not care, it is domination, covered in desire, seduction, used as leverage, submission, disguised as connection. Think carefully about the way this dynamic unfolds. In the beginning, you feel chosen, desired, elevated. You are not treated as an equal. You are treated as an object of devotion, as a symbol, as a prize. At first, that feels good. It feels like power, but soon, you begin to feel like you are no longer being loved for who you are. You are being loved for the role you play, for the way you reflect their fantasy. You are no longer a person, you are a function. This is not love, this is philosophical control. It is the belief that if someone gives enough pleasure, affection and validation, they can shape another person into anything they want. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote that power is not always expressed through violence. True power is the ability to define another person's reality, to make them forget they ever had another choice. In love bombing, this is exactly what happens. The manipulator defines your role. They decide what your worth is. They define your emotional landscape. You begin to exist in their story, not your own. The seduction is not about attraction. It is about rewriting your sense of self. This is where submission takes root. You do not submit because they demand it. You submit because you feel seen, because the manipulator has studied your longings, your wounds, your dreams, and used them as the foundation of the illusion. You submit because you believe the connection is rare, because the intensity feels like destiny, because pulling away feels like death. This is not emotional intimacy, it is psychological absorption. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir once argued that true love must include freedom, that if one person becomes the object of the other's projection, love becomes tyranny. You are no longer relating to each other, you are living inside someone else's creation. Love bombing collapses that freedom. It takes away your ability to define the relationship. It replaces consent with compliance. You are pulled into a role you did not choose, but now feel obligated to fulfill. Even when the charm wears off, you remain, not because of what is being done to you, but because of what you have internalized. You have accepted the manipulator's reality as your own. This is how seduction becomes submission. It is not about physical power, it is about psychological control. It is not about what they say, it is about what you begin to believe. Love bombing, at its core, is a philosophical lie. It tells you that love is about being chosen, being adored, being needed. But true love is not about being chosen. It is about being seen. And you were never seen. You were only used. Ask yourself, have you ever felt like someone was in love with the idea of you, not the real you? Have you ever felt pressure to keep playing a role because walking away meant facing a truth too painful to name? That truth is not just about them. It is about you, about how much you have given up, about how much you have tolerated, about how deeply you believed the illusion. And now that the philosophy has been exposed, the next question becomes more urgent. What happens when the illusion breaks? There comes a moment when the story no longer makes sense, when the compliments feel hollow, when the affection feels timed, when you begin to realize that you were never part of the picture. They simply drew you in. It does not come as a clear event. It creeps in slowly, one small contradiction at a time, a forgotten promise, a cold stare, a sudden change in tone. You dismiss it at first, then you excuse it, then you question it, until finally you see it. You were not loved, you were used. This is the turning point, the moment the mask slips, not always because the manipulator reveals themselves, but because your mind can no longer pretend. You begin to revisit the early days, the long messages, the intense stares, the immediate future plans, and you start to ask yourself, was that even real? You remember the compliments, word for word, but now they feel rehearsed. You remember the promises, but now you know they were recycled. You remember feeling like you were finally safe, but now you realize safety does not vanish without reason. What you are feeling is betrayal trauma, the pain of realizing that the person who claimed to love you most was the same person who broke you slowly. This is not just heartbreak, this is psychological collapse. The illusion breaks, and with it, your identity begins to shake. You might feel shame, you might feel anger, you might blame yourself, but none of that is yours to carry. You did not fall for the manipulator, you fell for the image they built using your needs, your wounds, and your silence. This is the hardest truth. You were not a partner, you were a mirror, and once you stopped reflecting what they needed, they discarded you. But you are still here, you are still breathing, and that matters. The moment of awakening is painful, but it is also powerful, because now you begin to take back control, not by fighting them, but by reclaiming yourself. This is where healing starts. When you stop waiting for closure, when you stop hoping they will explain, when you understand that there is nothing more to uncover about them, the work now is about you. Ask yourself, who were you before they told you who to be? What did you believe about love before they changed the definition? What parts of yourself did you bury to survive their affection? Write it down. Every lie you were told, every moment you silenced yourself, every instinct you ignored. Write it down and read it back. Let it feel real, because this time, the story is yours. Do not seek revenge. Do not seek validation. Seek clarity. Seek truth. Seek the version of you that lived before the illusion. This is not the end. It is the unmasking. Love bombing is one of the most destructive manipulation tactics because it leaves no bruises. It leaves memories, and memories are harder to erase. But you are not your memories. You are the one remembering. The romance trap may have held you, but it does not define you. The performance may have fooled you, but it did not destroy you. This is your moment to see clearly, to feel fully, to grieve without guilt. Comment below, what truth did you have to face in silence? What part of yourself did you lose trying to make someone else love you? You are not alone, and your voice might be the light for someone else in the dark. There is a silence that follows the truth. After the tears, after the memories, after the illusion shatters, you sit with it. You replay everything, not because you miss them, but because you are trying to find yourself again in the ruins they left behind. This is where most people hope for rescue. They want someone to explain why it happened, to fix what was broken, to promise it will never happen again. But no one is coming to save you. Not the one who hurt you, not the one who watched it happen, not the version of you that still thinks love must be earned. No one can save you, but you. You are the only one who can rebuild the inner voice that was silenced. The only one who can choose to stop blaming yourself for being deceived. The only one who can ask what part of your past made this illusion feel familiar, and what part of your future will never allow it again. Love bombing is not just a manipulation tactic. It is a reflection of what happens when people are taught that love must be proven through suffering, that affection must be intense to matter, that connection must feel like chaos to feel real. But you know better now. You have seen what false intimacy looks like. You have heard how charm can be used as camouflage. You have felt what it means to lose yourself in someone else's story. Now it is your turn to write one that is yours. Healing will not come from answers. It will come from boundaries, from clarity, from knowing the difference between someone who truly sees you and someone who only sees what you can give them. It will come from learning that peace is not boring, that love is not performance, that safety does not require sacrifice, and it will come from finally forgiving yourself, not for falling, but for staying longer than you should have. That is how trauma works. That is how conditioning works. But it is not how you have to keep living. The romance trap was never love. It was a test of your awareness, a challenge to your self-worth, a mirror that showed you how easily illusion can replace truth, when truth was never taught to you in the first place. But now, you see it, you feel it, and that means something has already begun to change. You may never get closure from the person who manipulated you, but you can close the story. You can walk out of the performance. You can stop trying to recover what was never real. And if that feels terrifying, good. It means you are not numb anymore. Because once you see the pattern, you will never see it the same way again. Ask yourself now, who do you become when no one is telling you who to be? What kind of love do you build when no one is teaching you to chase pain for validation? This is not the end. This is the first moment you are fully awake. If you made it this far, then maybe something deep inside you has already shifted. Maybe you are ready to see through more than just the lies of one person. Maybe you are ready to question the lies society tells about love, worth, and power. If this spoke to something buried inside you, like the ghost of a truth you always felt but never named, then share this video with someone who still needs to see it. Comment below what this revealed to you, not for attention, but for liberation. Someone might read your words and realize they are not alone. Like this video if you are choosing to walk away from illusions. Subscribe if you want to uncover more truths buried in the psychology of control, seduction, identity, and power. There is more coming, but not all of it will be easy to hear, because the next truths are darker, and you already know, once you see them, you cannot go back.